And this is it. This is Rosh Chodesh Sivan. We're there. We have gone through a period of preparation. You know, the truth of the matter is that we spent a lot of time preparing. I was on a taxi on my way to the airport in Israel. We all know that Israeli taxi drivers are the ones who really hold the key to all the secrets of our country and future. So I'm in this cab, and he says to me, I said, Los Angeles. He said, okay, b'shuma, you know. I said, why would we be giving shira there, you know? He says, v'anashim ba'im l'shma? People are going to come to hear you? I said, yeah, there's going to be 3 rabbis. I said, people are going to come. I said, and people are going to actually show up? I said, they're going to pay. The guy shakes his head, he goes, Amerikayim. And it's really true. This is a testimony to the nature of the people here, because we are quickly approaching Shavuos, and there's a tremendous amount of preparation that we need to do, particularly this year because it's a 3-day yontif for you. I live in Israel. Most people are not aware of this, but a 3-day yontif is what the Chazal invented to encourage aliyah. People don't even know that. So, and so there's going to be an enormous amount of cooking, especially if you do milchiks fleishiks. Milchiks fleishiks. I'm freezing this, I'm putting that, trying to get everything together, you know, and that's it. And we get so involved in the process that we often forget what it is that we're supposed to be doing, you know? How many times does that happen? I'm going to tell you, I'll tell you a fascinating story. I'm not going to tell you, do you want the rabbi look? Good, you got it? I give you the Rosh Yeshiva one. That's going to be for my playing card, just in case you wondered. But anyway, I love this place. But anyway, but the truth of the matter is that we can get lost. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm not going to tell you what I said, because that's less important. But the story is unbelievable. I had a student in Darchi Bina, and she calls me up, and I make a quick judgment in my head, because that's not always easy to do when you're in Israel, to figure out what the time is of the people who are calling you. You know, that's why sometimes you think you're going 7 hours ahead and 7 hours back, and you don't really know where you are, you know. So she gives me a call, and I make a calculation, and it's her wedding. She's already by her wedding. She must be, you know, taking pictures or whatever it is, and she's calling me, you know, and I pick up the phone, and she's crying. She says, Rabbi Orlofsky, you don't know what they're doing to me. This is the holiest day of my life, and I'm getting ready to get married, and all my sins get forgiven. It's such a holy, holy day. And what am I doing? They're doing my hair, they're doing my nails, they're doing my face, they're doing makeup, they're this, they're dressing me, they're doing all kinds of things to me. I'm trying to daven, and they keep telling me, put down your sitter, you know, stand like this, go like this, you know, and they're taking away from me my opportunity to really focus on what's important. I'm not going to tell you what I said, that's not important. But this, to have that kind of insight, that something so dramatic is taking place, am I ready for it? How much time do we spend preparing for things? It's it, and what we do spend preparing, you know, is it really what we're supposed to be preparing? Is it what we're supposed to be getting ready for? Shavuos, as is often true with Jewish holidays, is not a commemoration, and it is not a remembrance. It is a reenactment. That means that we will be standing Shavuos, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give us the Torah again. And in order to do that, we have to prepare ourselves. Without preparation, we will not be able to. That's why this is a holiday that the whole holiday is preparation. Right? It's described as Shavuos, weeks of preparation. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Torah. But we have to prepare for it. I want to illustrate this. Can I give you an example? With that program? Yes. There are these 2 drunks outside of a bar. And one of them says to his friend, I want you to go into the bar and get a beer. The second one says, I don't have any money. He says, here, I'll give you money. Go buy us a beer. So he goes in. He says, sir, I'd like to buy a beer to share with my friend. He says, well, you have money? Yeah. He gives him the beer. He starts to walk out. He says, where are you going? He says, my friend is outside of your establishment, and I would like to share this with him. Yeah. I figure I can tell this joke here. I can't really tell it everywhere because there was, first time I came to Toronto, I saw this American lying drunk in the street, which was really embarrassing. In Toronto, usually you do that in your house, it's not in the street. So I said, what are you doing? This is disgraceful. He says, I don't know, I got off the plane and I saw a sign, drink Canada dry. But anyway, so he's got the bottle of beer, and he starts to go outside. He says, you can't take the bottle with you, you have to put it in something. He says, all right, put it in my hat. So the guy fills up the hat, and he says, wait, I still have some left. He says, all right, put it over here. So he brings it out to his friend. He says, that's all the beer you got for $1? He says, no, I got more over here. Now, what's the point of this? He could have fit all the beer in and held on to it if he had only pushed the crown down a little bit more. You see this? Yeah? That's the idea. It's the preparation. As much as we prepare ourselves, that's what we're going to receive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to pour Torah down upon us. And we are going to receive as much as there's room to put it, as much as we prepare ourselves. And we spend 7 weeks preparing ourselves, and that's why, the people this evening who've made time out of their busy schedule to be able to come down and listen to speakers, help us prepare for Shavuos, is an unbelievably impressive thing, and I hope that all of you appreciate, what this means. In this chus, we're all going to go on and have an unbelievable Shavuos, Mir Hashem. So that's my own personal thought and appreciation. So I want to focus on one aspect, and there's a lot of different aspects. When you talk about something, Rabbi Tatz has a Rabbi Moshe Shapiro. I go to his shiurim. I wouldn't call myself a Talmud, but he can call himself a Talmud. So there is a very cryptic Gemara in Chagiga, which talks about the Arba Nichnasu Lepardes, these 4 people who go into this mystical orchard. One goes insane, one dies, one becomes an apikaris, one comes out intact, Rabbi Akiva. And Moshe gave a whole shir on this and a whole mahalach. And 6 months later, he got onto a topic, and he says, I want to explain the Arba Nichnasu Lepardes. So someone said, you explained it already. And he looked at him and said, don't worry, I won't repeat myself. There's more than one approach to understand it. So when we approach something as dramatic as Matan Torah, obviously there's many different approaches that we can take. And there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. And I want to focus on one aspect, which I thought is essentially the topic this evening. Right? As I will explain. The pasuk says that when they received the Torah, they received it betachtis hahar. That's what the pasuk says, which is translated as the foothills of the mountain, at the base of the mountain. The Gemara in Shabbos does it quite dramatically when it says betachtis hahar. I have a Gemara Shabbos here. It's Daf Peches, and it is written very small. Which, there was a time in my life when I could read this, but those days are long gone. You start to age. It's hard to acknowledge that. Me and my wife have to come to grips with the fact now that when the young couples get together, they don't invite us. I don't know if that's because we have 5 grandchildren. I don't know why, but in our mind, we're still young couples, But you realize that things start to go. I can't speak for anybody else here in my age group, but you ever notice that you walk into a room and you forget why? You open a cabinet, you just stare at it, and you say, there was something in here I wanted, So you understand why, because when you get older, the first thing to go is your memory. And the second thing is... whatever. Anyway... So I finally reached the point where I need reading glasses, which I'm not that disappointed in. Because now I can do what I had those Rebbeim who used to do this. The most devastating thing you can do when someone says something stupid, is to do this. It is the single most devastating educational move. This is often taught in graduate school classes. And there are people who buy themselves a pair of glasses just for this purpose. So now I finally have them. So when I have students, I just go. Anyway, so this is a Gemara in Shabbos, which is explaining this pasuk. V'yisyatzvu b'tachti sahar. Omer Rav Abdini bar Chamar bar Chasa. Melamed shekofa HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim es hahar kigigas. This teaches us that he held the mountain over their head like a barrel. And, Omer lahem, imatem mekabel matorah mutav, if you accept the Torah, good. Ve'im lav, sham tieh kfurascham. And if not, there will be your grave. Wow, pretty dramatic. That's what I assume the title of the entire thing is meant when it says, Matan Torah, an offer you can't refuse. If you're old enough to recognize that phrase, I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Oh, your signature or your brains are going to be on that paper. You understand? This is where that reference is from. I don't need to explain it. Suffice it to say that because I do know these references, that's why I wasn't invited to Citi Field last night. Amen. I have to tell this story. It's totally irrelevant, but I was one time invited to speak at the Aguda convention. They called me up to invite me to the Aguda convention. So I said, aren't you afraid to invite me? I might say something controversial. So they said, yes, we discussed this in committee. So we're going to have you do the women's, Shalashudis, because none of the Rosh Yeshiva come to that. And we'll have you do the closing on Sunday, because they all leave Motzi Shabbos. I said, I was kidding. I didn't realize there was actually a meeting. How can we invite Orlofsky and minimize the damage? So, so there you have it. So, he held the mountain over the head like a barrel and said, if you accept the Torah, good, and if not, there will be your grave. If that's the case, then everyone has a good excuse not to keep the Torah. I was forced. You put a gun to my head. I accepted it under duress. Yeah? And the Gemara's response is, you're right. The Gemara doesn't deny that. You're right. Amar Rabba, you're right. Afal pikein, hada kiblu b'yamei Achashverosh. Nonetheless, in the time of the Purim story, we accepted it willingly. Dichsiv, kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim, kimu mashi kiblu kfar. The Jews established the Torah and accepted it. They established what they had already accepted, and now they accepted it willingly. That's the Gemara. It's a pretty well-known Gemara. I have 4 questions on this Gemara. The first one is a very obvious one, and all the Mefarshim ask it. They already said, Na'aseh v'nishma. Whatever you say, we will do. Uncategorically. We accept it completely. We don't ask any questions. We're fine. We accept everything. Now you say you hold the mountain on my head and say you better or I'm going to kill you? That's really bizarre. Hi, could you do me a favor? Whatever you want would be my pleasure. You better or I'll blow you away. Good thing I didn't say no. That was with me saying yes. That seems kind of bizarre. We already said yes. That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, he held the mountain over their head like a barrel. That seems somewhat ineffective. I would have held the mountain over their head like a mountain. That's much scarier, like a rock. Allow me to illustrate if I can. Picture that this is a barrel. Picture that this is you. Yeah? Now watch what happens. Ha 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 ha. How's this look on the big screen? Is it? When we were speaking in Chicago, you needed a ticket. I didn't have a ticket, so I showed my picture on the little form. They said, oh, okay. I said, are you sure that's you? I said, well, I'm taller in real life. Now I can't even say that. But anyway, why hold the mountain over the head like a barrel? Should hold the mountain over there like a mountain. This doesn't do anything. Question number 2. Question number 3 is a picayune question. I apologize for it, but I will explain it. Because people, when you ask a kind of question that seems a little picayune, people are like, no, it's not such a question, you know. But to appreciate this, I learned in Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. If you're familiar with Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. If you're not familiar with Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim, we go very slow. That is the nature of Yeshiva Chavetz Chaim. We go very slow. The reason that the Gemara starts on Daf Beis is so that Chavetz Chaim guys will feel like they're covering ground. You understand? We're up to Daf Beis already, In every Gemara, you'll note that the first word is inside of a box. That's so that the Chavetz Chaim guys can measure their progress. Are we out of the box yet? The year before I started in Yeshiva, Rabbi Chait gave shir for the entire Elzman on just the Ha, the first letter of the first word, so they never got out of the box. I don't think they did till Hanukkah, but, so it's a somewhat picayune question. I explained it's part of my training. If you accept the Torah, good, and if not, sham tiek v'rascham. What do you mean sham? Po tiek v'rascham. Here will be your grave. What's there? Where's there? Question number 3. And question number 4, which is also an obvious question, is what happened in the time of Achashverosh, what happened in the Purim story to change everybody's attitude? Those are the 4 questions. So I would like to answer the first question and then bring in another source, which I hope will confuse people enough that they'll forget the first questions. This is what we do in Talmudic study. In any event, ask enough questions that people don't even care anymore what you said, and they just say whatever you want. Chas v'shem. But anyway, so the first question is, why do you have to threaten them? They already said Nasav and Ishma. Answers the Medrash Tanchuma. They were willing to accept the Torah Shebechsav, but not the Torah Shebal Peh. They were willing to accept the written Torah, but not the oral Torah. They were threatened in order to get them to accept the oral Torah, the Torah Shebechsav. Now, what was it that they didn't want to accept? Where would they have to be threatened? What was the point? So to explain this, I want to bring a Gemara in Bechoros. It's a fascinating Gemara in Bechoros, because the Gemara tells the story of Rabbi Yeshua, who was forced by the king to engage in a debate with the Chochmei Atuna, the wise men of Athens. And whoever lost would be put to death. So this was a very dramatic battle, but for us, philosophically, it is particularly dramatic. If you've ever studied Greek philosophy, so you know that Socrates, who clearly has too much time on his hands, is sitting on a street corner in Athens, stopping people on the street. What do? I'm a shoemaker. Won't you grant me that a shoemaker's purpose is such and such? Yes, but I could argue the following. And they go back and forth with the arguments until the shoemaker's job is just to say, oh yes, O Socrates, how wise, O Socrates, indeed, O Socrates. And this repeats itself over and over again until the people got so sick of it they killed him. But this is how Greek philosophy goes. They get a straw man, and they use him as a basis to present their arguments, and everything else is somewhat secondary. Yeah? If you learn a piece of Gemara, it's nothing like that. We're fighting. Every single line is argumentation. We're fighting to arrive at the truth. And if you can reach a conclusion, tiyufta to Rabbi Yochanan, tiyufta, right? You are wrong, Rabbi Yochanan. Say it again. Wrong. What are you? Wrong. Repeat it. Wrong. Blow him out of the water, kaboom! Then we had a good day in the base medrash. And that's where you can see people learning in the base medrash sometimes, those who are unfamiliar with the process, would think these two guys hate each other's guts. They're sitting there screaming at each other. You don't understand a Tosfos. That's not what he's saying. You don't know what you're talking about. They're yelling and screaming. And then one says, you want to get a coffee? Sure. They go out, they get a coffee, they schmooze, they sit back down again. You Amoritz, you don't understand Pshat, Because the goal here is not to be polite and sweet. The goal is to arrive at a conclusion. And we're going to fight to arrive at the truth. So now the Greeks are going to have to fight the Jewish methodology. And they're going to be at quite a disadvantage. Yeah? So they managed to arrange the debate, and the wise men of Athens throw in a condition. However, the debate will be done only in riddles. This set the stage for historical phenomena where whenever we would be forced into an ecumenical debate, they would always come up with some crazy rules or regulations to limit our ability. The Ramban's vikuach was unusual in the sense that we were able to have a fair fight. And then, of course, we won. But otherwise, they hamper us, they tie our hands behind our back in different kind of ways. They don't want a fair fight. The king had to say afterwards to the Ramban, I never heard a person who was wrong present his position so well. I know it can't be true, but you make a lot of sense. So that's why they always have to limit us. In fact, there was a famous story in one particular town where the priest goaded the king to force a debate between himself and the rabbi. And they had no choice. They had to submit to this debate. And if the Jews lost, they would all be forcefully baptized. And if they won, they would be free from the special taxes, that Jews had to pay and have certain other liberties. They had no choice. So they all gather in to the courtyard. They set up a stage. The priest and the rabbi ascend. And the priest announces that the entire debate will be done only in pantomime. The rabbi has no choice. Fine. So the priest looks at the rabbi and goes, without hesitating, the rabbi goes, priest is surprised. He certainly didn't expect the rabbi to respond so quickly. He didn't even know it was going to be in pantomime. The priest had worked this all out beforehand. Priest thinks, gets ready with his second argument, and he goes, again, without hesitating, the rabbi goes, the priest is shocked. How did he respond so quickly? He starts to sweat. He paces up and down. He's thinking. Suddenly he reaches down and lifts up a bottle of wine and a loaf of bread. And the rabbi nods, reaches into his pocket, and pulls out an apple. And at that point, the priest says, that's it, I give up. He's too smart for me. He counters everything so quickly. So the king says, okay, I guess the debate's over. I'll sign the petition. And all the Jews go home, and all the non-Jews go home, until it's just the king and the priest left on the stage. And the king says, listen, I may not be the brightest penny in the pile, but I have to tell you the truth. I didn't follow that at all. He says, you didn't follow that? So I said to him, you are not the chosen people. God is up in heaven. And he said, God is with us and supervises us throughout history. That's how we've survived. I said to him, God is three, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And he said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And then I took out the wine and the bread, showing only that through communion with the Savior can you hope to reach salvation. And he pulled out an apple, saying, that's because you Christians believe in original sin. But we Jews believe that anyone can reach God. He said, I had no idea our town rabbi was such a genius. He goes, if I knew this, I never would have debated him. So they get back to the shul for mincha. And everyone says, Rabbi, what was that all about? He says, I'll tell you the truth, I had no idea. He said, well, how did you have this debate? He said, I don't know. He said to me, all you Jews get out of here. I said, we're staying right here. He said, I'll slap you in the face. I said, you do it, I'll poke you in the eye. And then he took out his lunch, and I took out my lunch, and before you know it, it was over. I tell this entire shir only for that joke. I had that joke. And I said, how can I build a shir around it? Sometimes, you have some people who've heard this joke, actually, in a different version. No one's heard the same version. Everybody has a different version of this joke. But everybody comes up and says, people every now and then come up and say, oh, you heard that joke, So Henny Youngman once said, there are no old jokes, only old audiences. Remember that. In any event, so here the wise men of Athens agreed to debate with Yeshua, but only in riddles. So they say to him, they have the opening salvo, and they say to him, how do you preserve salt? How do you preserve salt? Salt's a preservative. Salt doesn't spoil. What kind of stupid question is that? So he says to them, with the placenta of a mule. Say the wise men of Athens, a mule doesn't have a placenta. And Yeshua nods and says, and salt doesn't spoil. I believe that answers all of our questions. Have a good Yontif. What? Or as one of my seminary girls might say, that is so random. Teaching in seminary, 15 years, I learned how to speak girl. But anyway, what does that mean? What's going on here? The Greeks said to Rabbi Yeshua, listen, you Jews are very impressive. You've been around for 1,200 years. That's a tremendous record. And throughout history, any civilization that could exist for 1,200 years with an independent identity, I have to tell you, that's very impressive. But you got to get with it. These are modern times. Hellenism is sweeping the world. It's 200 BCE already. You got to get with it. You got to add in some Hellenism to your salt. You're going to lose your youth. People are all being drawn to Greek culture. You got to add something to your salt if you expect to exist. Put on a toga, throw a discus, watch a tragedy, something. So Yeshua says, oh, you want me to add something to my Torah to make it a better Torah? Sure. I'll add the placenta of a mule. A donkey has certain milas, and a horse has certain milas. Yeah? Certain things a horse can do that a donkey can't do, certain things that a donkey can do that a horse can't do. Get them together, they have a baby, they have a mule, and a mule has certain milas over a horse or a donkey. But it has one serious drawback. It's sterile. And it will never reproduce. I can make a better Torah, I can make a better Judaism, and it'll be very popular for one generation. And then it'll die out. Because salt doesn't spoil. Yeah, sometimes other things might look more popular, but as Rabbi Tatz, quoting Rabbi Shula, said, as each wave of history comes and we bend over and let it wash over us, when it's over, we're the ones who are still around. There were those who tried to reject the oral law, the Sadducees, the Karaites. Today you can go weeks without meeting a Karaite, you know? When was the last time you bumped into a Karaite? I always have somebody who says, yeah, I know a Karaite. Shkoyach. Very good. As they say in journalism, you know, dog bites man, not news. Man bites dog, that's news. You know what I mean? So you found a Karaite. Shkoyach, we found one. You know, he's still been there since the 1100s. But at one point, Karaitism was extremely popular. The Rishonim had to battle them. The Gaonim had to battle them. They had the hearts of the Jewish people. They were so popular. And they vanished. They were popular for one generation, but it was just a mule. The Jews said at Har Sinai, we will accept the written Torah, but we will not accept the oral Torah. Meaning, we will make the Torah make sense to us and our generation. We will interpret it in a way that works for us. And so God held the mountain over their head like a barrel. Not like a rock. I'm not going to kill you. Like a barrel. What do you use with a barrel? To store things, to preserve things. A pickle barrel, a fish barrel, a herring barrel. You know, you put things in it and you keep it there. You store it in it. Wine barrel. You use it to store things. Today we use a glass jar. So let's use a more, contemporary example. He held the mountain over their head like a glass jar and said, if you accept the Torah, good. And if not, then I'm preparing this little glass jar for you because you're going to die out. Not now. I'm not going to kill you. Sham tiyek v'rascham. You know when Sham is? 50 years. 100 years. Whatever it's going to be. When you die out, I'm going to take this glass jar and put it on top of you. Not here. Sham, there, whatever time you guys die. And then I'm going to put you in a museum, and everyone's going to say there were these freaky people who lived out in the desert, for 100 years. And they lived this great lifestyle, and now they're all gone. You know why? Because they made a mule. They created something that made sense to them, but not something that's going to make sense to their children. We all think we can do it better. I was going through a particularly difficult time once. I have a Hasidic friend, and he says to me, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Baditchev is walking with his Hasidim, and suddenly he stops and he says, if I was a Kodesh Baruch Hu, you know what I would do? And everyone says, what, Rebbe? Just what he's doing now. Why, you think I'm smarter than him? And I was so moved by that. Of course I think I'm smarter than God. If I was in charge of the world, I would change everything. First thing is death for double parking. But, but they didn't put me in charge of the world. But I'm sure I could do it better. Everybody's sure they could do it better. So give me the Torah, and I'll make sure it makes sense for us. And it will make sense for us. But then it won't make sense for our children. It'll be something that is dated, and it'll be something that just vanishes. Although that seems somewhat anti-intuitive, because you think, you give me a tradition from 3,300 years ago, why should that stick around? And the more modern innovations disappear. But history has shown that to be true time and time again. What happened in the time of the Purim story that changed all of this? Because the situation changed dramatically. We lived in the land of Israel for 850 years. That's a long run. And then we went into exile. And in exile, there were Jews who felt like, listen, this is a new reality and we need a new leadership. And who is our leader? This old Jew, Mordechai. Mordechai HaYehudi, the Yid. The Alte Yid from the old country. And Achashverosh, the king, is making a banquet and he orders everybody to come. And Mordechai says, don't go. It's mamash also. They said, wo steht? Because throughout all of history, Jews have spoken Yiddish. I don't know why people think it's of Germanic origin. Moshe was really known as Moshe Rabbeinu. But anyway, they said, wo steht? Where does it say don't go to a party? He says, there's a fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch. It's called Das Torah. Trust me on this. I'm telling you, there's a tradition that I've received from my Rebbe and from his Rebbe and from his Rebbe, and I'm telling you, don't go. This is a trap. I know what's going to happen. And they say, Reb Mordechai, you're a fine Jew. You're an old Jew. And we need Jews like you to stay in the Beis Medrash, to say Yortzeit, Yisker, we'll bring you the chicken to see if it's kosher. But this is new times. You don't understand. And they go to the party. And the Gemara says that's when their fate was sealed. And then Haman comes out, adorned with idols, and orders everyone to bow down. And everyone bows down, because I'm not bowing down to the idols. I'm bowing down to Haman. I'm not really bowing down to Haman. I'm showing respect to the king. And on and on and on. And Mordechai doesn't bow. And they said, Mordechai, it's okay. He says, I don't bow down to idols. You're not bowing down to the idols, you're bowing down to Haman. I don't bow down to idols. Mordechai, listen, this is a very difficult time. We're not in Eretz Yisrael anymore. I don't bow down to idols. Mordechai, you and your crazy chumras are going to get us killed. I don't bow down to idols. Sure enough, comes out a decree, all you Jews are going to get killed because of Mordechai. And all the people said, I hope you're satisfied. Now we'll try to solve the problem that you created for us. And so they go to Esther, they try to get Esther to help, and instead Esther invites Haman to a private party. Forget it, she's sold out. Where do we go? They're turning hishtadlut, they're trying everything they can, every technique, and finally they give up and they come to Mordechai and said, I don't know what to do. He says, do tshuva. Now's the time, do tshuva. And they start davening, and they see the next day a gallows, 50 amos high. Mordechai is going to be hung the next day. Well, he had it wrong the whole time. Comes the next day, they see Mordechai hanging from the gallows. And someone says, wait a second, he didn't have a three-cornered hat. I think that's Haman. What do you mean? Haman's hanging up there? Can't be. Yeah, that. Anyone got a binocular? Yeah, that's Haman. So where's Mordechai? Oh, there he is. He's got the robes of the prime minister. Yeah, he comes out, and suddenly the king, gives him the royal ring, and everything turns upside down, and everything's turned around, and everyone had to admit, you know something? Those old Jews know something after all. Lahavdil, as Mark Twain said, when I was 18, I thought my father knew nothing. And when I became 21, I was surprised how much the old man learned in 3 years. As you get a little wiser, you start to realize that there's a reason they're called sages. You know what I mean? Maybe they see something we don't see. Maybe they understand something in a different context. I mentioned earlier Rabbi Tatz's humility, and when he was faced with that medical question, I would have answered it on the spot if I had his background. And he made sure to ask Rabbi Yosef and got a completely different answer. That's the sign of greatness of the Jewish people, that we understand those old rabbis sitting there in the little Beis Medrash will understand things better than we do. Then Kimu v'Kiblu, then they accepted the Torah Sheba'al Peh for real. Then they said, these people know something we don't know. That's the Gemara. When Rav Shneur Kotler lost a son, a number of Gedolei Torah came to pay a shiva call. And at the shiva call, the question came up, how come you mourn 30 days for a child, but a year for a parent? And Rav Ruderman said, because when you lose a relative, it's a personal tragedy. That's 30 days. A brother, a sister, a child, a spouse. But when you lose a parent, it's more than a personal tragedy. You lost your link to Har Sinai. Your parents were one generation closer. They took you back to a time that we can only read about in history books. Interesting, when Rav Ruderman was nifter, so his Talmud Rabbi Fran said, when you shook his hand, you shook the hand that shook the hand of the Alta of Slobodka. I remember when Rosh Hashiva Moshe Chait died, Rabbi Orlofsky says, Moshe Chait didn't die today. Rabbi Dovid Leibowitz, his Rebbe, did. Because Kozman that he was alive, you saw his Rebbe. They took you back to another place and time. They took you to a different reality. They were that link, and you lost that link. I say this because I look at this Gemara and I look at my own life. And the parallels for me are dramatic. There was my grandfather came from Vengrov, Poland. If you have an opportunity to miss it, take advantage. It wasn't that much fun back then, and it hasn't really gotten any better. It was a little shtetl. My grandfather was dirt poor and grinding poverty and decided to make the big sacrifice and move to America. He came to America and eventually brought over his wife and his child. My father was born in Brownsville, a little Jewish ghetto in Brooklyn. And they were very poor. The Depression hit. Times were very hard. My grandfather was an observant man. As the Chavetz Chaim says, you know why all the Jews in Radin keep Shabbos? Because all the Jews in Radin keep Shabbos. And not because he knew anything. He didn't. He was not a learned Jew. He just knew this is what you're supposed to do. My father was an intellectual. He was not able to get a lot of formal education because he had to go out and help support his family. He didn't make it past junior high school. But he was a very smart man. You know, and he told me in later years, he said, I used to go into the shul where the old men would be sitting there saying Tehillim. And I'd say, why? Why this? Why that? And they said, don't ask any questions. You don't ask questions. There was no word Somayach back then. That was the best that you got. You asked a question, it was, you don't ask questions. That's it. You just accept, you just believe. For my father, that wasn't good enough. So he moved out to the suburbs, married a nice Jewish girl, had 6 boys, of whom I'm the quietest. So, can imagine what it was like growing up. I was the kid who used to sit on the side and read, and everybody else was having rock fights, It was like, forget about it, But, and that was it. He founded a conservative synagogue, the East Meadow Jewish Center. And it was perfect. I spoke to one of the other people who were the founders years later, and he said to me, we called on representatives from the 3 streams, and we all came from Orthodox homes before we moved out to Long Island. He says, reform was too goyish for us. That wasn't for us. And Orthodox, they had nothing to offer us. And the conservative came in and said, we'll give you a chazan, and they'll sing all the nigunim that you remember, and you can sit with your wife, and you can come, for Yom Narayim, and you don't have to come on Shabbos, and nobody will say anything to you, and we'll have a Hebrew school, you get your kid to bar mitzvah, you know what I mean? And it'll have the feel and the flavor, even if it doesn't have the integrity. And it was perfect for that generation that was dropping out of Orthodox homes. It gave them the feeling, even if it didn't have anything that was of that much substance behind it. Open parentheses, I knew a fellow from London, and he said that his father used to take them to, I think it was called Penny Park Lane, which was the old Jewish ghetto in London. He says, we didn't keep Shabbos, but on Sunday morning, we had a ritual. We all went out there. And my father would buy us lox and herring and pickles and bagels. And he'd say, take a deep whiff, children. This is Judaism. It had the smell. It felt good. My father went into the shul. He heard the old nigunim. It reminded him of growing up in Brownsville in an Orthodox shul. We grew up in Long Island. This didn't have any meaning to us whatsoever. We didn't know there was anything behind it. For us, this was an ordeal. You had to drag us to shul. You had to drag us to Hebrew school. Nobody wanted to go. Not surprisingly, demographically, because of this, even though when I was growing up, I started first grade in 1964, which was about 15 years before I was born. And if I make the cheshbon correctly. But, when I was there, everyone knew Orthodoxy was dead. It's gone. There's only conservative Judaism, and every shul that opened was conservative, and that was it. By the 1970s, a study done by the conservative movement themselves showed that of 100 kids in a congregation, I was talking about my generation, 3 will become Orthodox, 17 will become Reform, 30 will remain conservative, and 50 will disaffiliate. Amazing. How could that be? They were so successful. By the 80s, they said the average age of a conservative Jew was in the 50s. They were in the 52, 53, whatever. How could this be? What was happening? By the 1980s, articles were already appearing about Orthodox triumphalism. The average age of an Orthodox Jew was in the teens. What happened? Because after World War II, those old rabbis who survived the Holocaust came across, and they looked at America and they said, there were problems. Problems in Kashrus, problems in Shabbos, problems in Tznius, Taras Mishpacha. Where do you start? And they all said, there's only one thing to start. Salt doesn't spoil. Build Jewish schools, give kids a Jewish education, and you'll see it'll turn around. And slowly, slowly it turned around until you look at the situation today, and other movements which are fighting for survival look at Orthodoxy and say, how did this happen? Salt doesn't spoil. You can make a mule, be very popular, but it's sterile. It can't reproduce. I have a brother who's a genius. Every Jewish boy is a genius. He went to Brandeis on his full scholarship, graduated first in his class. He went to Duke Law School, graduated first in his class. They give out 7 special awards. He won 5 of them. They offered him a clerkship in the Supreme Court. He had a fellowship in Yale. He was a bright boy. In 6th grade, he had a fight with one of his teachers about Constantine, which I know is an emotional issue for most elementary school children. And he challenged her to a debate. Like an idiot, she accepted. And my brother won. So the principal calls him my father and says, listen, you can't keep this kid here. You got to send him to a private school. Now, my father didn't know from a private school. Grew up in Brownsville, So that meant the yeshiva. So the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County had just started. It was building grade by grade. And Rabbi Findel agreed to accept my brother going into 7th grade. And he convinced him to send the 3 younger boys. And suddenly I was dropped in the yeshiva. We didn't keep Shabbos, and I was dropped in the yeshiva. And step by step, we started to grow until the 4 boys who went to yeshiva all became frum. Then the other 2 joined in. Eventually, my father joined in. My parents have 37 grandchildren, all of whom have gone to yeshiva and have all been brought up with Torah values. We have almost 35 great-grandchildren in the family. All of those that are of school age are attending yeshivas. And the entire family, needless to say, is a completely different family. I followed down other branches of my mother and father's trees. They're almost gone as Jews. Either they didn't get married or they didn't have kids, or they intermarried. And here is this unbelievable branch. I make up an Orlofsky family calendar, just starting with my parents, going down. There's like 120 birthdays, anniversaries, all in that little calendar there. That's just from one branch. That's from one family. And this story is repeated hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times. And because of that, because there are people who know that salt doesn't spoil, no matter how popular something else may appear, that's the only reason we're still around. We stand at Har Sinai and we're given an option. How much do you want this? How real do you want it to be? And there are people who are willing to accept it to a certain extent. You know what? I'll take the Torah Shebiksav, not the Torah Shebal Peh. I'll take this part and not that part. This works for me, that doesn't work for me. I was in a shir with Moshe Shapiro. He said something, and he prefaced it with the following words. This is very hard to hear. I'm going to tell you something, but it's very hard to hear. Now, he says a lot of things that are very hard to hear. He never gave this preface before. You follow the laws that Hashem gives you. Serve God with all your heart and with all your soul. Then you'll get rain, and you'll get the crops, and get all kinds of good things. Be careful whether your heart turns away and you turn to other gods and you bow down to them, then there'll be no rain, you'll get no food, and you'll get kicked out of the land. It's two extremes. If you serve God with all your heart and all your soul, you'll get bracha. If you serve idols, you'll have nothing. He says, what if you're in the middle? I don't serve idols. I don't serve them with all my heart. I mean, okay, do I get half the rain? Some of the crops? Maybe just oats? You know what I mean? Like, can we negotiate something here, And he looks at us and he says again, I'm going to tell you something, but it's very hard to hear. If God is not God 100%, then he's not God at all. You are. And if I say, God, I'm going to let you be God 99% of the time, then he's not God, you are. You've decided how much you're going to let him be God. Otherwise, it's 100%. Otherwise, it's, yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it takes a tremendous amount of strength to be able to do that. And in order to do that, we have only one thing that has kept us alive, and that's that salt. Or Somayach has been in the kiruv field for many years, and the kiruv field evolves. And you have to make more exciting programs, and you have to do different kind of things and change things around, And in Somayach, they have this really clever technique that they developed some years ago. It's called studying Gemara. And they take beginners in, and they drop one of these books in front of them, and they say, we're going to study this. How's your Aramaic? A little sketchy, okay. Well, just to make it more interesting, we took out all the punctuation and the vowels. Oh, all right, that sounds fun. Rashi's in the middle. We gave him a different script because we thought that would be too easy. You know what I mean? I still object to the fact that they decided to put the headings in bold. I didn't have that when I went to yeshiva, And let's go. And we sit there and we study, but it's not all study. We go on trips to graves of famous rabbis, Because Somayach knows how to give you a good time, And we say there's only one thing that works. Salt doesn't spoil. I have the schus of staying with an old friend, Daniel Gray, and, I'm speaking to other people around Toronto, and, I hear everybody says, well, I have to get up at 5 o'clock because I have a learning program over here, and I have to get up at 6 o'clock because I have a learning program over here, and I have to get up at a quarter, And there must be somebody going to that 8 o'clock minyan in the boat shul, don't get me wrong, But there seems to be so many people who figured out that salt doesn't spoil. There seems to be enough people who worked out that, if we reconnect to Torah, if we reconnect to the very simple and basic concept that learning Torah has to be a part of our lives, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to set the agenda and we're going to attach ourselves to that, then those are the Jews who are going to survive. People talk about Jewish survival. Don't worry about Jewish survival. The Jews will be around. The question is only whether we and our children and our grandchildren will be. And the way to ensure that is to remember, don't make a mule. Salt doesn't spoil. Don't end up in a glass jar. As long as we connect ourselves to something that's real, then we'll have something that will keep us going, not just for 3,300 years, but for our children and grandchildren and to the coming of Mashiach. Have a wonderful Yontif.
Our Somayach does many things locally, not only the Farsla Jewish Center, but it's great that we have also people out on campus, and it's a big kavod to have here. My chavrusa in the morning, Rav Bernie Moskoff, and it's great to have you here, Bernie. And also doing outreach for all the ladies on campus, Stella Oziel, and it's a great honor to have you here. A big eshechet for both of you for coming and for devoting your life to the Jewish people. I would like to call up my dear friend, the person that gives Daf Yomin at the Farsla Jewish Center, Rabbi Yaakov Kaplan, president of Our Somayach International, to introduce our next speaker.
Good evening, Shus, Morai, V'Rabosai, all the Rabbanim that are here. Thank you so much for coming. It's a great honor that you came for us, for our Somayach. And I want to thank all of the Rabbeim also for being here away from their families to Mahana us before Yom Tov. I have a couple of points to make and introduce Rabbi Orlofsky. The first one is that Or Somayach belongs to Klal Yisrael. It's a yeshiva that is very open, very available to all of the men that are here. If they're in Yerushalayim, if it's for an hour or a day or a week and they want to plug in, they want to charusa, they want to go to shir, what you're seeing here this evening is a mashal, a small taste of what you get in Or Somayach every day. And you're welcome to come and to share in it and to be part of what is also your yeshiva. The second thing is that we have programs that are ongoing in Or Somayach, especially one that's called the Mentor's Mission, which is an opportunity for Balabatim to come and share with boys who are coming for the first time to yeshiva. And it's a 5-day trip. It's together with 50 or 60 college kids that are non-frum, and it's tremendous inspiration for the boys to have the opportunity to meet Balabatim and spend that time and have the sense of a Yiddishkeit that it's not just for the Rabbanim that sent them on the trips. We have a video out in the hallway if anybody wants to see as they're leaving on Mentor's Mission. We're going in Mitzvah Hashem on our 14th mission, I think, something like that, in July Mitzvah Hashem of this year. Finally, Rabbi Orlofsky, who I have had the zchus to know for many years and all of you are familiar with, is someone who has inspired our generation, both in yeshiva and Or Somayach, hundreds, perhaps thousands of boys who he's taught, and of course, all of the seminaries where he's teaching, my daughters attended. It's so special to have him here, but I have something that really is unique, which is I feel that Rabbi Orlofsky actually made me famous. And the reason is that he mentioned my name in one of his lectures. And that lecture got posted on the internet. And I got about 25 phone messages from people that said Rabbi Orlofsky mentioned me in a shir. And I really feel that he made me famous. And in the tape that he said that a lot of people talk about knowing things about wine and about whiskey, but when I have a question about single malt, I call Yaakov Kaplan. Thank you, Rabbi Orlofsky.